the world conditions us into a lot of ego-driven goals. We think that that's what we should be doing if we can, because somehow that's the measure of success. This is a way I can do everything that I want to do for my ideal life.
Welcome to the Career Relaunch Podcast, focused on helping you reinvent your career. My name is Joseph Liu, and I'm here to help you gain the clarity, confidence, and courage to manage the ups and downs of making a career change so you can do more meaningful work and enjoy your professional life. In each episode, I feature people who have stepped off the beaten path to reinvent their careers. We talk through their unique personal journeys, the challenges they overcame, and the lessons they learned to help you understand what it takes to relaunch your own career. Today, my guest is going to describe her transition from being an investment banker to brand marketer to business owner. We'll discuss how to honor your own unique career interests, seek out those things that call you, and craft a career that works for you. Afterwards, during today's Mental Fuel, I'll talk about balancing the various pillars of your life and career. What does it really mean to live your best life? Is it achieving professional success, financial freedom, being physically fit, having a loving family, pursuing a clear purpose, or all of the above? Figuring out how to design your career and life in a way that makes you truly happy isn't always easy. And sometimes those things you thought might bring you more professional happiness, like more money, a fancy title, or growing your business, just leave you feeling emptier inside. Making the right choices is often less about doing what looks good on paper, but instead doing what you feel is uniquely right for you. Today, I'm speaking with Sadaf Raza, the founder of Lead Early, a leading admissions consultancy for master's MBA and executive MBA programs in the UK and Europe. Sadaf prides herself in being able to quickly identify and articulate an individual's unique strengths, leveraging the industry expertise she's gained herself through multiple career pivots to help candidates shape their business school applications. She's worked as an investment banker at Bank of America, a brand manager at Procter & Gamble, and franchise manager for EMEA at Johnson & Johnson before starting her first entrepreneurial venture in retail. She has an MBA from INSEAD and is passionate about using her 20 plus years of experience to help others accelerate in their careers. Now, a former client of mine actually introduced me to Sadaf, and after connecting with her last month, I felt like she could provide some unique perspectives on changing careers and shifting from full-time employment to running your own business. We're going to talk about how to avoid the trap of doing what you feel you should do in your career so you can focus your efforts instead on what you want to do to honor your own values and priorities. And we'll finish up with a few helpful perspectives from her on how attending business school can enable your career pivot. You can get all the show notes from today's conversation at careerrelaunch.net/106. Sadaf spoke with me from London, England. Okay, hello, Sadaf. Welcome to the Career Relaunch Podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Joseph. It's so nice to be here.
Well, I know you've got a lot going on right now, and there's so much we want to cover today. I would love to start by just getting a sense of what you have been focused on professionally right now in your life, and then we can talk about anything going on for you personally in a moment.
So I'm an admissions consultant. I work with master's, MBA, and EMBA applicants in the UK, Europe, and beyond. And it's just come to the end of the busiest admissions season. So it's been full on. And at the moment, we're doing lots of interviews. I interview on behalf of INSEAD Business School. And so I really enjoy helping people prepare for their interviews, whether it's for admission or for a job or a promotion that they're working on. And I think as we come into the summer, there will be a lot more of that to come. So it's been fun. I love what I do, so it doesn't feel so much like work, but it's been busy.
I guess you're familiar with lots of different business school programs. You work with lots of different business school applicants. Are you working with any particular type of cohort? Are these the people who want to do an MBA or an executive MBA or both?
I think because I myself am an alumni from INSEAD Business School, I tend to get a lot of INSEAD-focused applicants, but most people are applying to multiple places. I also get a lot of master's applicants for like specific subjects like economics or finance or management or marketing. So it's a mix, and I think that makes it interesting for me also.
What about personally? Anything keeping you especially busy recently in your life outside of work?
I have two boys that keep me exceptionally busy, not in this season, but in all seasons.
How old are your boys?
They are turning 4 this weekend and 10 next month.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I guess very different types of challenges with those ages and different things that they're doing. Well, I know that you haven't always worked in this space as a business school admissions consultant. I do want to talk about your time working in a range of industries, including banking, marketing, and eventually talk a little bit more about Lead Early. I would love to go back in time a little bit and first of all, talk about where you're originally from. I know you're based in the UK now. Where did you grow up? And can you tell me a little bit about that environment?
I grew up in Lahore in Pakistan, so very different environment. I'm one of 4 girls. I went to an all-girls school. I was the first one in my family to go abroad to study. My parents didn't know at that time that I applied, and it was just something that I really wanted to do. And then after that, all my female cousins sort of came there much more naturally. But yes, I was seeking new adventures and opportunities, and I guess that's what drove me.
Now, I have, as I mentioned to you before we started this recording, I have been to Lahore actually myself. Could you give people a glimpse into what life was like for you? What do you remember about your childhood growing up there? And can you paint a picture of just the overall environment, especially in the context of careers, what you thought you wanted to do when you grew up, what maybe you were told you should do when you grow up? What was that like for you over there?
I remember having sort of lots of long summers being bored. There was a lot of time with cousins. There was a lot of time with family. There was definitely girls versus boys things to do, like a divide there. Yeah, it was a very happy, simple childhood. Let's put it that way.
How did you come to the decision to move to the UK? Because I would imagine that's quite a leap to take, going from Pakistan all the way here to Europe. Do you remember how you started to think about wanting to move away from home?
It was just wanting opportunity. I felt like a lot of things that you maybe saw on TV or you heard about was just not offered to you. Even things like sort of work experience while you're a student. I mean, nobody does that in Pakistan because you don't have side jobs. It's not safe as a girl to do so. And I think that a lot of times I'd heard people say, girls can't do this, right? So for instance, I remember I used to debate in school, like a lot of children now do. And I remember one of the semifinals in the debating championships. I was from a girls' school. We were up against an all-boys school, a leading school. And one of the boys said, girls can't win from boys,
Wow.
just a 16, 17-year-old. And I remember being very pumped in my team and being like, yes, we're going to do this. And then we ended up winning. I won national debater. I think that changed things for me when you sort of, somebody tells you can't do it and then you do. That was probably a year before this decision to apply to university. So I feel like, when you do one small thing that you thought you couldn't, that kind of gives you confidence to do the next thing.
Well, let's talk a little bit now about your time in the UK and that chapter of your career. There's a lot to cover here. I'd love to start by talking about just your educational entry into the UK and what that transition was like for you, how that started to shape what you thought you might want to do professionally.
So when I came to London in my very first week, I thought, I'm a Londoner. I'm going to live here. This is amazing. And I signed up to every club or activity that there was at university. And then I was very focused on getting internships because I knew that you need some experience to be able to do that. And while my degree was in computer science, the investment banks were the ones that were really hiring because you had to prove for a Pakistani student that nobody else in the country can do the job that you can do. And, you were like 17 or 18, 19 at the time. That felt like a tall ask. And so then I was kind of focused on, getting all the help I could with building my CV and kind of getting help with my interview skills. And I guess this is what maybe motivates me to do what I do today, because I got a lot of help from well-meaning people along the way. And that advice paved the way for me. And I enjoy doing that for other people.
Now, you would eventually land at Bank of America as an investment banker. That is no small task to land a role like that coming out of university. Like, what do you attribute that to? Because it's a very competitive industry. And as you mentioned, you're coming here as a foreign student. How do you feel you were able to land a role for such a competitive role in a competitive industry?
Honestly, it was the right advice at the right time. I know I wasn't the only one at a good university getting good grades. Everybody who was applying to these internships was. I was just the person who, at the time, didn't have the knowledge to pay for experts to help me, but I would speak to anybody who I thought had, some advice to offer, and got some very useful advice at the right time. Because I think a lot of time people are willing and able, but they don't recognize what is needed for a particular industry or a particular role. And I think that helped me then pitch myself in a very targeted way to those employers.
Now, in terms of the investment banking world itself, I will say we haven't had a tremendous number of iBankers on the show. And I'd be interested just to get a glimpse into what that world was like for you. I know this was many years ago, but you spent 3 years in this industry. And I think when I think about the corporate world, I guess stereotypically iBanking and maybe like consulting would be up there as one of the supposedly most like cutthroat, intense, competitive environments with long hours. What did you think you were getting into? And then what was the actual reality of working as an investment banker for you?
I mean, all that you hear about workaholism is true. The culture was definitely be in before anybody else and leave after everybody else, and be busy, and be challenged. You weren't kind of explained tasks so well. It was sort of, take your best attempt at doing the work, and then somebody senior than you will improve it, and eventually somebody will fix it and give it forward. So it was a lot of thrown at the deep end. But at the same time, it was very exciting, doing the analyst training program in New York. You went and lived in a hotel for, I think it was 10 weeks or something, traveling and having meetings with CEOs of companies, and you're right there in the room with them, and you've done some of the pitch work. So you are kind of presenting your numbers. The training was really good. I think for me, I always knew that I had a creative side. And I feel that my upbringing and the conditioning was those who could do STEM subjects did those. Those who couldn't, they would do more creative subjects. So while I was good at maths and I was good at more creative things, it was obvious I was pushed towards technical stuff because I was so lucky that I could. That's when I realized, okay, I'm doing all this training. That's great. But I want to do stuff that I'm very excited to do. And I need that to be more creative. Structured finance was considered the most creative side of the bank, but it wasn't quite the creativity I was looking for. And so I decided to move out of there.
Now, how did you come to the decision to move into brand management? I hear you that you wanted to work in a more creative industry. Was marketing just the obvious next step for you? How did you come to that decision to move from banking into marketing?
It was not an obvious one. I didn't know much about marketing at all, to be honest. I was confusing it with sales. They were all mishmashed in my brain. I didn't know anybody who worked in marketing, because then suddenly I was surrounded by everybody in finance and kind of tech. And so that was tricky to figure out what I wanted to do. But actually, I thank the admission essays for these business schools that I was applying to, because they make you write very detailed answers about specific short-term, long-term career strategy. And so I realized I don't know much about this. Let me apply to something that sounds exciting. I thought Procter & Gamble was like this, marketing school, best in class. And I was the only one company I applied to. And I only intended to learn about brand management through the process. And then I ended up getting an offer for INSEAD and P&G the same weekend. But that was the whole idea of applying, was to learn. And then I decided to take the plunge and do Procter & Gamble. And I was lucky enough to defer my entry to INSEAD. So I managed to do both. But it was a little bit of, I have an idea what I want to do, but I need to start doing it to figure it out.
That's a good weekend of news, I suppose.
Yes.
And so you've got the option of going to business school. You have the option of going to one of the top tier consumer packaged goods companies. Was that a tricky decision for you to decide which to do first? Because I guess you could argue it either way. I guess on the one hand, it's good to get some additional experience before you get to business school. But on the other hand, I guess you could go to business school and learn the nuts and bolts of marketing before applying it. How did you think through that educational decision versus let me go further in my professional experiences?
I am the type of person who usually wants to do both if I can.
Me too.
And so I realized that if I was more familiar with brand management, since I didn't know much about it, I just had this one experience, that would be more meaningful to then go to business school to use that knowledge and see where I want to go from there. And that was definitely the right decision, because when I did join Johnson & Johnson after INSEAD, they had a fast track leadership program. And I jumped about 6 to 8 years in the marketing hierarchy because I had done the marketing and then I had come in now as a senior person. And so I didn't know that at the time, but that worked out much better for me. And I do think before business school, most people use the business school to transition because they can't transition without it. And so if you do have the opportunity to transition, it's an immense learning experience to know what it is that you want to do by being in it a little bit. And so I think that was a better strategy.
What was the world of brand management like for you at Procter & Gamble and J&J? Did you feel like you were able to feed that creative thirst that you had? And how was that career chapter sitting with you personally? Do you recall what that was like?
Yes, I loved it. The creativity, it felt quite natural. It's very practical. You go into stores and you see your products everywhere, and I would fix it on a shelf if I saw something in Boots. And it was a great learning experience also practically. Like when I did entrepreneurship later, sort of the brand marketing training was about, understanding consumers, understanding your brand, understanding how to get more consumers to buy from you. And I think that was very valuable training.
One other thing I think that comes up, Sadaf, with people who make these radical industry changes is sort of a sense of, I don't know how to put this, but a bit of tension between trying to maintain your past trajectory or to go off and make a leap, which is, I think, what you did here, and pursue something that you actually genuinely feel passionate about. Was it a struggle at all for you to walk away from the banking world? And I don't mean that as like a leading question, but given that it's so competitive to get in, was there any part of you that felt like, so many people would want this role, maybe I should stick with this, or was that not really an issue?
No, absolutely. People thought I was ungrateful, to have this opportunity and to reject it. Like, who would do that? And to be clear, I was very grateful. I appreciated, I could not have stayed in the country if I hadn't had the job. And I learned so much. But it was when I started speaking to people, actually, I spoke to a career coach at the time. And, the advice to me was stick it out longer here. Don't leave yet because the good part is coming. And then I realized, but when I have more experience in finance, but then I want to change, it's going to actually be even harder because the opportunity cost is going to be even more. And I'm now going to be more of an expert in finance. So if you want to stay within the industry and pivot, maybe that more experience can be handy. But if you want to change industry, then actually it's better to get out earlier because it just only gets harder the longer you stay.
So you are enjoying your time at J&J. You're loving the world of brand management and the creative outlet that it provides. I know eventually you would shift into doing some more entrepreneurial endeavors. How did that come about? And how did things start for you having some entrepreneurial business on the side?
So I had 2 business partners on the ground in Pakistan when I started a retail venture. And it was really a conversation that came up about a business opportunity in the retail space. As somebody with an entrepreneurial flair, I just saw the opportunity in it. And then as somebody who had now done business school, I could see the potential in it. And as somebody who was a marketeer, the excitement of building a brand from scratch without anything constricting you was super exciting. And lastly, as somebody who's ambitious, then kind of determining my own fate and being able to run, which is what I wanted to do at the time, felt like more exciting than the perfectly happy career I had in brand management. And so those are the reasons I decided to take that leap.
Now, I'm just looking at the timeline here. So if I've got this correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're at J&J from 2010 to 2012. L'Atelier, which is this venture that you mentioned that you co-founded in Pakistan, that's running from 2010 to 2016. So it seems like there was some overlap here. How did you manage that? J&J, like that's a pretty intense, not intense, but like I guess it's quite a demanding job at this company. And at the same time, you're trying to start this other business in Pakistan remotely. How did you balance that?
So I think of L'Atelier as my first child.
Okay.
And as any parent would tell you, you have no idea what you're getting into. And then you somehow find the time to keep this child alive and thriving while having a full-time job. And you probably just sleep less. You're tired, but you're excited. You're doing them both. So that's exactly how it was. So exciting. And yes, and I definitely could not have done it with two partners on the ground. But I did the business development and the marketing, the things that I enjoyed, my forte. And yes, the business did really well. And that kind of is another encouragement that keeps you going.
The other thing I was curious about is, because it sounds like you were balancing both for a while. And at the same time, eventually, again, if I've got the timeline right here, you would dedicate your time full time to working on L'Atelier. How did you come to that decision to let go of the steady full-time work and to dedicate yourself 100% to what was, I suppose, initially a side hustle, but eventually would be your full-time focus?
Yes. So it was the success of L'Atelier. We were profitable from day one. Our business model was very good. And so not just in revenue, I mean profitability. We made our money back in 15 months. This was a big 6,000 square feet retail space we were running. And then we grew into our own label, a salon on the retail premises, online store. And it was the point where we were going to open another store in another city, which was also going to be even bigger, like 10,000 square feet of space.
Wow. Okay.
That's when I thought, okay, I am ready. I need to be on the ground and I need to take this to the next level.
What do you remember during those first days of going to an office to kind of being in it with L'Atelier and I suppose doing a wide range of a lot of things all at once? What was that transition like for you?
It was very exciting. It's like you're obsessed with this project. You're always thinking about it. You always have ideas around it. I mean, I didn't have children at the time, so it was easier to be, all in. And there was a lot happening, but I have very happy memories of that period.
So then I guess this then begs the question. So it sounds like things are going well there. You guys are growing rapidly. On paper, this looks like a pretty good transition. You're running L'Atelier, things are going well. It sounds like it's super exciting. Where does Lead Early then come into the picture? How did that enter into this world of entrepreneurship for you?
Yes. So there were two things happening there. One was the retail industry, which has struggled worldwide. We had similar issues with retail. So you either had to double down and go into production or something, or you were just paying 3 times more for the same retail space because the laws had changed and the economics was just not there in the same way. And then at the same time, as I was thinking, do I want to kind of, go into production now in Pakistan? I contemplated what was it that I was really passionate about, because the retail opportunity was because my business partners were passionate about the sector and I saw the business opportunity in it. And as I thought about my own passions, that's where the education industry became apparent to me, because I was always the sort of person who was a lifelong learner. I really valued all the investment and learning I made and how it changed my trajectory. And I really wanted to help people kind of learn from not just my experiences, but the experiences of all the people I now had access to in my network who were doing really well. And that's when I felt like, okay, this is a space that I would like to play in.
I'd love to shift gears here just a little bit now, Sadaf, and talk about this solo venture of yours, because you guess you were working on L'Atelier with a couple business partners. What's different about this is you're running this on your own. And I'd love to hear a little bit about what the early days were like for you in like 2016 when you were just trying to get this idea off the ground. Like, what do you remember? I guess I'm thinking about the good, the bad, and the ugly as you're trying to take this idea of working in the education space and turn it into something concrete.
I bootstrapped it. That was always my business style, like have the business make money and then reinvest it. And initially it was very exciting. It was kind of like that. It's the lean product. I'm forgetting the term, but it's basically you're selling the idea and you're making the product at the same time.
Right.
And it's just you and you're running with it. It was very exciting. I was led by creativity. And so in that period, I made a simulation from scratch and I had so much exciting stuff going on. So it was great, but it was also very busy because it was just one of me. And so it was nonstop. You were running before you could walk and you were kind of doing that all over again. So it was quite tough, that bit of it. It was relentless.
I'm just thinking, you mentioned you've got a 10-year-old son. And so this is, I guess, 2016.
I love the math that you're doing constantly. I love it. You're
some
like,
basic math.
Every date.
Not investment banking math, basic math here. But so he's entering the picture here, I guess, at the exact same time that you're trying to get this off the ground. And I'm just curious how you managed that. Because you got this newborn, I think, that is coinciding with you trying to get this business started. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that balance.
Let me add one more thing to the mix to make it more exciting for you, Joseph. The week I actually launched Lead Early, I was living in UAE at the time. So in Dubai was the week I moved back to London.
Was that intentional?
So the idea was I was planning to move back to London and I wanted to test the idea out in Dubai. I kind of wanted to do a pilot and the pilot took off and it made sense to kind of fuel the fire where it was burning. Was starting it in London because it was already had started in Dubai. And so I just kept running with that then. And I had a little baby and I was living in the country. Yes, it was a lot.
I would also be curious to hear about the evolution of Lead Early. So you're coming up, I guess, to 10 years of running this thing. How has your business changed or not changed over the past few years?
Yes, so it has changed. I changed my business model, going with kind of conventional business school wisdom about scale, which is what I was doing at the time. So we were growing like 200-300%, but it wasn't enough. You just had to keep reinvesting and keep growing. I realized that I wanted to do a business that was more a freedom first sort of model. And I'd love to hear your thoughts because I feel you live in the same space.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Like, you're building all of this to one day eventually exit. You don't know when that day is going to be. And this period just feels like really intense and nonstop. I had one child, I wanted to have another child at the time. And I was like, how am I going to fit this all in? And then COVID happened, which in some ways was a gift to me personally because I couldn't travel to Dubai. They were very strict about the way the program was categorized. You could not operate it. There was no distancing way of running it. It was kind of in the banned stuff category for a while. Parents who were sending their children to homeschooling will remember that was not a pleasant experience. And nobody wanted to have more screen time for their children, beyond school hours. And that took me back to the drawing board. And then I thought, okay, I still want to be in education. I still really want to help people with all that I have learned, but how do I do it in a meaningful way that supports a life that I have, that gives me freedom to spend time with my children, to look after my health, my family, but also help people in a significant way. And this period in their lives, when they're applying to university, and it can make the difference between them going to a second-tier university or a premier university. That totally changes your options. Or if you are applying for a job and you're not getting it, getting that job means economic transformation for yourself and your family. That felt really something worth doing. And so that's how I pivoted, and I am here in this version of Lead Early today.
Am I correct in thinking that this is still just you at this point running the day to day and you are the one doing the consulting?
Yes, by design, it is me who will directly work with any candidate. And I don't plan to have like a team of staff because I want to be able to do this work directly. This is what I enjoy doing with people. And I have, of course, teams of people, agencies helping me do stuff. But the idea is on a need basis, I hire people for the role that they're providing, but I don't want to have scale an organization with lots of employees as a business model. And I understand, Joseph, you do something similar. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this too.
This is a really interesting topic for me, Sadaf, because I don't know about you, but as somebody who runs my own business and has run my own business for over a decade now, I will say that it's quite often that I'll get questions from other people, especially people I think in the coaching space, because I guess technically I sit in that industry, like the coaching industry. And I regularly get questions about, like, are you thinking about growing your team? Have you thought about scaling this? Questions about like passive income streams. And I, like you, have resisted, I guess, the temptation or the pressure to scale or to try to scale. And at the same time, it just comes up a lot in discussion. And it's something that does make me think about it. Like I think about like, am I doing this the right way? Should I be scaling? Like, should I be growing? Is this not big enough? Is this not fancy enough? And so it's something that I have wrestled with over the years, but I've always come back to some of the things that you mentioned, which is just that I do prioritize the flexibility. I'm also a parent, and with our daughter 7 years old, I want to be able to maximize my time with her. And I feel like that's easier to do if it's just me. But it's come up a lot. And I'd be curious to hear how you have thought about that or maybe deflected any of the incoming questioning that you've gotten, especially because you have been in a situation where you did run a business that was scaling and was growing exponentially. So yeah, I'd be curious to hear how you've thought through that.
I feel like my business is still growing. I like the fact that I work with a select number of people, but I can choose who I work with. I'm still kind of pushing myself outside my comfort zone, doing some new things. So I still feel it's exciting. And so for me, I think this is a lesson in life that, even when I did banking, for instance, there's the well-meaning people giving you good advice about what would be better for your future. You have to kind of take that in, but then you have to remember you are the expert on yourself and the only one at that. And you have to think about, okay, what is it that will really make me happy? What is it that I'm trying to solve for or do? And does this add to that? Or is this just a good opportunity or something that somebody thinks is a good idea, but maybe it's not for you at this point in time? And so I'm much better now at asking myself the question and deciding independently and with clarity that actually, no, this is what suits me. This is what I'm looking for more of in my life right now. It feels really good, but you have to keep remembering that because it doesn't stop people, asking you and well-meaning giving you advice. And so you have to take it as a gift and then use it or just put it on the side.
I do want to talk about some of the lessons you've learned along the way of your journey. And also, I'd love to cover a little bit around getting into business school and any tips you have for people on that. But before we do that, you mentioned something that you want to have more of in your life, which makes me think of the topic of wealth, where people are traditionally measuring wealth in terms of material possessions or money that you've earned or financial assets you've accumulated. And at the same time, I guess you're mentioning a different type of wealth, which is more like lifestyle wealth, which is freedom and control of your time, the ability to have a flexible schedule so you can spend time with the people you want to spend time with. How has your measure of wealth evolved over the years? And I guess I'm thinking about this because in the context of you, because you started off in the investment banking industry, which is about as financially focused as an industry can get. And now you're someone who's focused much more on these other lifestyle aspects of wealth. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how your measures of wealth or what you have wanted to have more of has evolved for you over the years.
It's a great question. So there's two things that come to mind. One is I think there was a study done by Harvard maybe, where they asked, I don't know how many people on their deathbed what they wish they had done differently. And nobody said earn more money
Right.
or work more. And everybody says some version of spend more time with the people that matter to me. And I think as you kind of think about your future, I think it's wise to learn from people who are already at the end of their life and looking back. And so I think that was a good lesson to have. And the second conversation was with my sister once during my crazy scaling stage, where I was plugging in numbers in my business model. And she asked me, how's it going? And I said, oh, I made quite a conservative projection and it does not feel so exciting. And she said, oh, really? Okay, doesn't matter. And then the next day I went to her and I said, oh, I'm so excited. She said, what happened? I said, I just changed my projections a little bit and made them less conservative. And actually, like, this is amazing, And she's like, wow, what are you going to do with all this money? And then I came up with something really simple. Like, I was like, I would love to get lots of massages. And she said, that doesn't cost that much money. And I realized, you're right. Why am I doing all this? It's the things that I want to be doing. I can do that now. So it was that realization of the world conditions us into a lot of ego-driven goals. And I feel like we think that that's what we should be doing if we can, because somehow that's the measure of success. But actually, if I think about, okay, what's the money I have? Where do I want to spend it? I will still, want to get value. I still want to, the things that I actually need. When if I break them down, I'm like, actually, this is a way I can do everything that I want to do and more. And so that's really what I should, break it down to and then work around, versus just kind of success as a kind of trajectory of just monetary growth, which is, of course, part of it, because if you don't have enough money, you're going to want to make more money. But I think it's the whole kind of work, play, love, health that has to come into, at least it does for my ideal life.
I feel like there's such a default assumption that one's salary must go up with every subsequent move, or that you must be earning more, you must be scaling. And I remember when I started my business, I actually felt really uncomfortable with my salary because it was significantly lower initially, at least, than my corporate salary. And I remember I was talking with my friend Hitesh, and I was talking to him about this, and he just said, look, are you able to do the things that you want to do? When I thought about it, I thought, you know what? Yeah, I'm not doing anything because of finances. I'm still able to do the things I want to do. I think we sometimes almost glorify money. I'm not saying that people don't need money, but I think that beyond a certain level, that incremental benefit is sometimes not as great as you think it is. And so yeah, but money is an interesting topic to think about. I would love to finish up by just asking you a couple questions about some of the lessons you've learned along the way, Sadaf, of your very interesting career journey, and then finish up with a couple business school questions for you. If you had to give yourself any advice to your younger self as it relates to navigating career pivots, what might that be?
The first thing I would say is, in anything you want to do, there are experts that exist and people who are already doing it. And the more you can get closer to speaking to those people who are maybe doing the ideal thing you're doing, or pay for advice, like people like you, Joseph. I wish I had met you then, to get the help to transition, because I think it feels hard on your own. And I feel like all the support you can get in that process, I think it's worth it, because it's hard even with the support. You still have to make things happen. And the second thing that I would encourage other people to do who are thinking about transitioning in any way is the action part. I think we all live too much in our heads, pros and cons, and evaluating. And I think that if you take little action towards whatever thing you think, maybe I should test it out, I think investing to test is the best thing that gives you clarity that just analysis alone will never give you. So small step in the right direction, and the options get clearer and the path emerges. You sort of have to just act in that direction first.
And having been through this career change journey, what's one thing that you have learned about yourself along the way?
I think I've learned that I can do anything I set my mind to doing. And I think I have to choose wisely, because once I have decided this is what I'm going to do, then I'm going to do it.
Final question here for you before I hit you with a couple lightning round questions around business school. But when you look back on your career change, Is there anything that you wished you had known about changing careers that you now know?
That is going to be okay. There's the fear of the unknown. And actually looking back, each step was me seeking out something that was calling to me and getting me closer to the life I wanted to live. So all the kind of anxiety around should I, shouldn't I, how would I, just do it.
I can't let you go, Sadaf, without asking you a couple questions about your area of expertise, which is around getting into business school and thinking about going to business school. I would love to hear your perspectives on how somebody can think through whether or not they should go to business school. Are there a couple things or a couple triggers that you feel should prompt somebody into thinking that, hey, now might be a good time to think about going to business school?
If you, in your education before that point in time, you feel like maybe you didn't go to the best school that you could have, or you feel like you could study something else that you didn't know at the time, want offered at the time, I think it's a great way of getting that kind of stamp on your CV and for you to really explore so many wider topics and meet so many inspiring people who then become your network and help you navigate life for the years beyond business school. And so I think it makes sense to make that investment in yourself. I feel like a lot of time people again measure it with success, which is typically like your job straight after business school. And of course, that's an important aspect, but I feel so much of the benefit is for years to come. It's the life that you lead with like-minded people who are inspiring you and who are helping you problem solve whatever you are trying to do in your life, be it personal or business. And I think that's a huge addition to your quality of life.
I also know that you mentioned you only applied to INSEAD for business school. Coincidentally, I also, when I was applying to business school, I only applied to one business school, which was the University of Michigan, where I eventually did my MBA. How should somebody think about like the number of schools to apply to? Now, you and I are extreme cases where we only apply to one. I suppose there's another extreme where you're applying to hundreds or whatever. I know this must vary on a case-by-case basis, but how do you think somebody should think about how many schools to apply to, especially in the context of somebody perhaps being a busy professional like you were when you applied to business school?
3 is a good number, 3 to 5 if you want to have some kind of backup. But I would rather focus your energy and make the best 3 applications that you can do and get into all 3, ideally, then hedge your bets with more. Because I don't think applying to more increases your chances. I think it's about being very targeted, understanding the uniqueness of that business school, understanding the story that you have and what you offer, and then making that match obvious to them. And I think that takes time. And so if you're going to try to do that with too many, you're probably not going to do a good job. So it's worth doing more effort for fewer ones and highlighting just how important they are to you and how much of a match you are for them.
And any common mistakes that you see amongst applicants who are trying to get into business school that you tend to notice come up time and time again that people should consider or try to avoid?
Yes, so many. But I would say be as specific as possible. I think when people are trying to write in, beautiful words, and they often kind of miss the point, and it's very important to zero in on the content. And even though you're going to business school to open your options, you need to have done the work before, perhaps with someone, to understand exactly what your career trajectory could look like, what you're aiming for, and know kind of the company you might want to work for, the kind of work you want to do, the geography you want to be in. Be very self-aware of yourself. And again, the more specifics you can put in there, the more it shows that you are truly knowledgeable and will make the most of the experience.
Well, speaking of getting the right help from the right person, I know this is one of your areas of expertise. Can you just finish up by telling us just a couple of the key services that you provide to prospective applicants and where people can go to learn more about the work that you do?
Sure. So I work with candidates through the whole process, from figuring out which universities to apply to, which course, understanding what is amazing in their story. A lot of times people are unaware of, between all the things they've done, which would be most exciting for this university. And then doing the CV, the essays, the interviews, choosing between offers, applying for scholarships, the all round. And as part of that, when I find candidates who don't have relevant work experience, for instance, and they need an internship on their CV, or they need to get to a particular type of promotion or work for their CV to be ready for their next educational journey, I help with them sort of end to end with the process. And I do that by all my years of experience in different industries. I think that gives me a maturity to applications and writing about careers in a way that reflects well on the candidates after we've had those conversations. And my website is leadearly.co.uk. And so if anybody wants to get in touch, just drop us a line.
Thank you so much, Sadaf, for first of all talking to us about your very interesting career journey, the twists and the turns, how you made that transition from the corporate world into running Lead Early, and also just some of the tough questions that you've had to wrestle with and to get some clarity on yourself as you try to figure out what sort of business can work for you and the kind of life that you want to have. So I wish you the best with Lead Early, and I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who could benefit from working with someone like you. So it's great that you're offering this service to people out there. So thank you for all the work that you're doing too. And thanks for coming onto the show.
Thank you, Joseph. It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed chatting to you.
So I hope you enjoyed hearing Sadaf's perspectives on the importance of connecting with the right people, taking small steps that add up over time, and honoring your unique interests. Now it's time to wrap up with today's Mental Fuel, where I'm going to pick up on this topic of living your ideal life. Before we get to today's Mental Fuel, I wanted to thank Wise for supporting this episode of the Career Relaunch Podcast. Wise is the world's most international bank account. It lets you hold and convert multiple currencies in one place, offering a smarter, easier way to move money internationally without the typical bank fees or foreign exchange commissions. It's what I use myself to handle most of my international money transactions. Try Wise for free at careerrelaunch.net/wise. This is the part of the show called Mental Fuel, where I finish the show with a brief personal story related to one of the topics we covered today and leave you with a simple challenge to help you move forward with your own career goals. So for today's Mental Fuel, I wanted to build on something Sadaf mentioned about success not being limited to financial metrics, and how you should try to make career choices that enable you to live your ideal life based on your definition of what's ideal. She mentioned how she considers the various aspects of her life around work, play, love, and health. And this got me thinking about how we're all tending to various pillars of our lives that go beyond just work itself. This is something we used to talk about during my life coach training days, the various spokes of your life. We called it the wheel of life. And it involves rating the different dimensions of your life, like career, family, social, recreation, money, and or health, on a scale of 1 to 10, based on how you're feeling about each dimension. And what I quickly realized as I went through this exercise with client after client is that each dimension of your life requires attention and effort. Each is important. Each affects your overall life satisfaction. One often comes at the expense of another, and keeping all those plates spinning exactly as you want is really tough. What I also noticed is that how you're feeling about your job often has a disproportionately large knock-on effect on the rest of your life, probably because we spend so many of our waking hours doing work related to our day jobs. And this is something I've felt myself during the various stages of my own career. When I was feeling happy at work, I had the energy and enthusiasm to feed other aspects of my life. And when I was feeling unhappy with my work, my personal, social, and family life tended to suffer. For me, at least right now, I find myself balancing 4 major pillars in my life, my 4 Ps, if you will, which are, in no particular order, professional, parenting, partner, and personal. First, professional involves my work as a self-employed career consultant. And within my body of work, I'm always trying to find the right balance amongst the various strands of my work as a speaker, content creator, writer, coach, and podcast host. My biggest struggle right now is keeping up with the volume of work, which is actually a good problem to have. But because I don't have a big team, I feel a lot of pressure to keep everything going on my own at all times. My second P is parenting. It's the other major responsibility I have right at the top of my list of priorities, along with professional. Between school drop-offs and pickups, daily admin, getting our daughter to and from her activities and events, and the volunteering I do at her school, this is often the daily rhythm and force that dictates the flow of most of my days on both the weekdays and weekends. That creates almost no room for slack or downtime. My third P is partner. My wife is someone I'm always thinking about, and our relationship is central to pretty much everything. So there used to be a time, pre-parenthood, when we had way more free time and one-on-one time together. The nature of our daily interactions has shifted dramatically since becoming parents. Now we really have to make a proactive, concerted effort to get that quality time in with each other that goes beyond just getting through the daily chores, life admin, and pressures around work and parenting. And finally, personal. Anything outside of work, including parenting and partner, but kind of my catch-all other category. The things I try to fit in, but don't always do a great job of fitting in because of the demands of my other three Ps. My own health and physical fitness, connecting with friends, socializing in general, helping my mom out when I can, like the trip I just took with her to Taiwan last week to help her move back there after she lived in the US for the past 50 years. And of course, just slowing down, which I'm not so good at, and enjoying fun stuff, which includes my hobbies like photography, which I'd love to add as the fifth P in my life, but it's just not happening. So these are the four Ps I'm always trying to balance. At certain points in my career, I felt more pressure to climb the corporate ladder to prove myself professionally. At others, I dedicated myself more fully to parenting to be there for our daughter during her really early years. The reality is that it's often a zero-sum game with a finite number of hours and energy each day. Investing more into one almost always comes at the expense of the other. And as much as I try to combine them, they tend to pull me in different directions. I've never quite been able to pull off a happy equilibrium. I always feel like I want to be investing more energies into something I just can't quite make room for, and I find it frustrating when I can't do it all. But these days, I'm trying to give myself a little more leeway because I'm doing my best to be as efficient as possible with the resources and time I have without sacrificing my own well-being. I also try really hard to assume this about others, that they're doing their best with what they have. It's so important for you to think about the various spokes of your life. What are they for you? How much of a role do you want each to play? And most importantly, what steps are you taking to invest into those that matter the most to you? A lot of times, other people's expectations can have a huge impact on where we choose to focus our energies. Maybe you feel pressure from your family to be more present, or you feel an implicit pressure from your industry peers to follow a certain professional trajectory, or you have an intrinsic internal drive to constantly grow, scale, or increase your impact. I honestly can't tell you how to balance it all. It's something I struggle with myself on a daily basis. But what I can tell you is that you absolutely cannot be everything to everyone. You can't please everyone. You can't be everywhere all the time. And you will rarely have the luxury of just dropping things to make room for something else. You have to be selective. And at some point, you've got to accept that you may need to loosen your grip on one thing if you really want to invest more time in another. My hope is that you'll do it in a way that honors who you are, what matters to you, and what you truly value. Don't fall into the trap of making choices based on what others think a good career or life should look like. Do what you feel is right for you. This is really the only way you can live your best life. This takes me to a quote from the English actress Emma Watson. I don't want other people to decide who I am. I want to decide that for myself. You see people as they go through their career, and they just become more and more like everyone else. They start out with something individual about them, but it gets lost. So my challenge to you is to identify the top pillars you've been dedicating your energies to in your life and career recently. Name them. Then take an honest look at what you've been prioritizing and consider whether you've been investing your energies into the right pillars that bring you joy. Avoid fixating on achieving the standard societal definition of success. The idea here is to dedicate your energy and resources to what makes you happy, not what you feel should make you happy. And if you've been over-investing in what looks good on paper, while under-investing in those things that matter most to you, maybe it's time to recalibrate. If you want to share your thoughts on what it means to live your best life, or if you have a question or a story of career change you want to share, leave me a voicemail at careerrelaunch.net/106, where you can also find a summary of my discussion with Sadaf and learn more about her. Again, that's careerrelaunch.net/106. If you enjoyed today's show, I'd really appreciate you leaving a positive review and rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to hit that follow button so you can get the latest episodes of the show delivered right to your device. Thanks so much for being part of the Career Relaunch community, and a very special thanks again to Sadaf Raza for sharing her story with us today from London. This episode was mixed by Liam McKenzie. Today's music was curated by Jonathan Rinaldi-Pole, and the Career Relaunch theme song was written and performed by Electrocardiogram. I'm Joseph Liu, and I'll talk to you next time.